I was still logged into the deployment terminal when it came, 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of timestamp that brands itself into your memory, not because it means anything, just because of what followed. The subject line read, "Immediate role, restructuring." No greeting, no context, no meeting invitation or voice on the line. Just a sterile block of text dropped into my inbox like a guillotine blade. After careful review of our organizational needs, we have determined that your role is no longer aligned with Axion's strategic direction. This decision is final and effective immediately. Your final paycheck will be processed by end of week. This is not personal. I stared at that last line for longer than I should have. This is not personal. 15 years in systems architecture. 2.5 of those spent single-handedly rebuilding the foundation of this company's digital infrastructure. 80-hour weeks, crashed servers resurrected at 2 a.m., platforms that no one else could stabilize except me. And now I was being vacuum sealed out of existence with a subject line and a smiley from HR. I closed the terminal window and opened my internal admin dashboard, logged into the root shell, began wiping credentials mine, not in anger, not even in protest, just habit, precision, closure. Then I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk. Tucked beneath a half-eaten granola bar and a tangle of old cables was a navy blue folder. I flipped it open with the same calm you'd use sorting laundry. Inside 7 confirmed patent certificates, 3 more pending, all under the name Leora Brandt. Filed personally, approved federally. Covering every subsystem, Axion's platform depended on load balancing, distributed authentication, real-time sync protocols, multi-tenant segmentation. The crown jewels. They didn't know. Celeste Rowan, our high-gloss VP of Operations, had never once asked about the technical origins of the system she bragged about in every board meeting. She spoke in phrases like seamless scalability and visionary architecture, without understanding a bite of it. And now she'd just fired the person who legally owned the very spine of that architecture. I smiled, not wide, not cruel. Just the kind of small, satisfied smile you wear when someone hands you the match for a fire they don't know they started. I placed the email printout into the folder neatly beside the patents. Then I stood up, tucked the folder under my arm, and walked toward the exit. Calm, unbothered, ready. Because while they'd spent months calling my work a tool, I'd been treating it like a weapon, and I had just decided it was time to use it. 9 months before the email, I sat in a glass-walled conference room at Axion Data Corp reviewing a system audit that felt more like an autopsy. Their infrastructure was a Frankenstein's monster of mismatched frameworks and shortcuts that should have triggered criminal charges. 3 dev teams had tried to fix it. All 3 had either quit or quietly vanished. That's when they called me. Celeste Rowan made the pitch herself, VP of Operations. She wore confidence like perfume heavy, expensive, overwhelming. Everything about her was curated hair like a luxury press release voice, tuned to sound decisive even when she was talking nonsense. "We're looking for a rebuild from the ground up," she said, sliding a sleek tablet across the table. Disruption, vision, scalability. The words tumbled out like a keynote speech. I tapped the screen, pretending to review the proposed architecture she was so proud of. It was laughable patches stacked on patches like duct tape over a leaking dam. "We just need it to scale," she added, leaning back. "The how is your job?" I nodded, because the salary was solid, because the challenge was interesting, because I wanted to see if I could build something from absolute zero and make it last. The first week was a haze of credentials, coffee, and triage. Their cloud environment wasn't just outdated, it was duct taped together with hope and deprecated libraries. There were entire modules that hadn't been touched in 6 years, and nobody remembered what they were for. But even then, I noticed the tone from above. Celeste wanted innovation, but not complexity. The moment I asked for more budget for test coverage, her response was instant and smooth. Test suite slow delivery. Let's be lean, agile. What she meant was, make it work fast. If it breaks later, we'll blame someone else. That night, I stayed late. The office was dark except for the soft hum of machines and the glow from my second monitor. I opened a clean document and began outlining the architecture I had in mind. Something modular, scalable, resilient, something future-proof. Then I opened the USPTO pre-filing portal. Just a placeholder for now, a draft. A quiet habit I'd picked up over the years, like brushing my teeth. I'd been burned once before, ideas taken, names forgotten. I wasn't planning revenge, not then, but I did believe in insurance. And as I submitted the first provisional application, I had no idea that one day it would be worth more than the entire company that was about to depend on it. It started with a line of syntax that looked too familiar. I was combing through Axion's authentication module, trying to trace why user sessions were randomly timing out in certain regions. I expected messy logic, maybe even missing encryption protocols. What I didn't expect was to see my own code line for line variable names and all. I blinked. Then I pulled up my old GitHub repo from a startup I'd co-founded 5 years earlier. Private archived and explicitly tagged internal use only. There it was. Same structure, same comments, even the same typo in a log message I never bothered to fix. They hadn't just borrowed inspiration. They'd copied it. I took a screenshot and walked down to Celeste's office, still thinking somewhere deep down that this had to be a mistake, that maybe a junior dev had cut corners without realizing the implications. Celeste didn't even glance at the screen. She was thumbing through emails on her phone. "Legal will sort it," she said. "You just focus on making it stable." Her tone wasn't dismissive. It was indifferent, like she'd already filed this under things that don't matter. I stood there for a beat longer than I should have, waiting for some acknowledgement, a flicker of concern. But she never looked up. That was the moment something shifted. I walked back to my desk, calm on the outside, but my fingers were already opening a new document. A protocol I'd been sketching in my head for weeks, load balancing across microservices with zero state retention, self-healing under concurrent load. It wasn't finished, but it was mine. And I wasn't just drafting it this time. I filed the patent that night. Not a placeholder, a full provisional application with diagrams, claims, and version history. I even documented the stolen code just in case it became relevant later. From that day forward, every innovation I designed, every algorithm, every system, architecture, every technical decision I logged, diagrammed, and filed under my own name. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about credit, ownership, proof. Weeks passed and I kept building. Celeste, meanwhile, was busy polishing her narrative. I heard through our CFO that she'd pitched her platform design to the CEO, Griffin Vaughn, a finance guy who thought Jason was a type of espresso. She used my diagrams, my language, and dressed them up in slides labeled strategic vision. I didn't correct her. I didn't speak up. I just filed the next patent and kept my receipts. The IPO announcement came in the form of champagne in the break room and a town hall with bad lighting. Griffin Vaughn stood in front of a giant screen showing upward-pointing arrows and abstract digital renderings of growth. He spoke with the confidence of someone who'd never shipped a product in his life. 18 months, he declared. We're targeting Q4, our valuation's tracking at $2.7 billion and rising. The applause was loudest near the front where the sales and marketing teams clustered. I stood in the back near the hallway door sipping flat ginger ale. No one mentioned the tech. No one mentioned the infrastructure that had taken me 2 years to stabilize, scale, and secure. But I knew. They all did. They just didn't want to say it out loud. Over the next week, I noticed a shift. Celeste held more closed-door meetings than usual. Griffin stopped by engineering, his first visit in months, making vague references to our crown jewel architecture. Something was happening. Then I heard the whispers. Titannet Solutions was interested. a potential acquisition, rumored offer $450 million contingent on technical due diligence. It made sense. Tightnet had been trying to break into enterprise cloud for years. Buying Axion would give them a shortcut, a platform ready to ship tested under real load scalable across verticals. A platform I built. One afternoon, I stayed late to rerun server health checks before a traffic spike. Celeste was in the office next door on a call, speaking just loud enough for her voice to carry through the thin drywall. Our platform is fully proprietary, she said. Designed in-house by our engineering team. No external dependencies. No licensing issues whatsoever. I didn't move, just stared at the monitor as my jaw tightened. No external dependencies. I opened a browser and went to the USPTO site. 7 patents. My name. All filed. All time-stamped. 1 for distributed authentication, 1 for real-time sync, 1 for load balancing, 1 for cloud container orchestration, each of them foundational. I clicked through the document slowly, my pulse steady. Patent, patent, patent. Every piece of what they were selling, what they called fully proprietary, was already mine. I leaned back in my chair and looked out over the empty office. For months, I had played the good soldier, solved their problems, let others take credit, stayed quiet, stayed late, stayed useful. But now they were planning to sell what they didn't own for $500 million. That was the moment I decided to stop building and start preparing, because the system wasn't just unstable, it was fraudulent, and I had the paperwork to prove it. I didn't argue when they let me go. Celeste didn't even deliver the news herself. HR did it over Zoom camera off voice scripted full of polite emptiness. Your contributions have been valuable and we wish you all the best in your next chapter. I boxed my things in less than 15 minutes. A few desk plants, a keyboard I brought from home, a folder with printed patent filings, though that last one never left my sight. I walked out of Axion's glass tower with no tears, no fury. Just a clean exit and a cleaner conscience. 3 days later, I sat across from Margot Fierro in her corner office in Palo Alto, the kind of space that made you feel like justice had a view. She flipped through the paperwork slowly with the precision of someone used to winning. My patents were laid across her desk like a fan of knives. These are solid, she said, tapping the top sheet. Filed while you were employed, yes, but based on concepts you developed and documented prior. You retained authorship, attribution, and independent application. This is airtight. I nodded, exhaling for the first time in days. Then she raised an eyebrow. Mind if I ask, did you ever pitch this technology to anyone before Axion? I blinked. Actually, yes. Tightnet, 2.5 years ago. She opened her laptop. Let's check something. Within minutes, Margot had unearthed the email thread. My original outreach, my slide deck, the technical overview. Then Tightnet's response. Promising framework, but we're not investing in solo founders without a leadership team. Best of luck. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was perfect. They passed on you, she said, almost amused. And now they're about to pay $450 million for the same architecture, thinking it belongs to the company that pushed you out. I leaned back in my chair. The room was quiet except for the low hum of Margot's air purifier and the occasional flick of pages. Outside, Silicon Valley kept pulsing forward, full of venture pitches and PowerPoints, pretending to be strategy. Inside, I was finally holding proof that I hadn't just built something functional, I'd built something valuable. Margot turned to me. What do you want to do? I looked down at the folder in my lap, at the patents, the dates, the email thread from Tightnet, the clean mechanical text of my termination letter. I want to talk to the buyer, I said, before they spend $500 million on something they don't actually own. Margot smiled slow and razor sharp. Then let's give them a reason to listen. We met in a neutral spot, a coffee shop in downtown San Francisco, all reclaimed wood and glass, the kind of place that sold $8 lattes and charged extra for silence. Janelle Drayton was direct, sharp-eyed, dressed in a navy pantsuit that matched the weight of the offer she came to deliver. She slid into the booth across from me, set down her tablet, and didn't waste time. "We've reviewed your filings," she said. "There's no ambiguity. The core architecture belongs to you." I stirred my drink, letting the cream swirl slowly, and she didn't blink. "Would you consider licensing it to us directly? Full rights, clean acquisition, no Axion involvement." The phrasing was intentional. Clean, quiet, legal, no mess, no headlines if I played along. I leaned back, studying her. "Depends. Will you put my name where it belongs this time?" She nodded once. "Credit compensation acknowledgement, all negotiable." Outside traffic hummed. Inside, everything stilled. I hadn't come here for revenge. That would have been easy, emotional, temporary. What I wanted was permanence, not just a payout, legacy, the kind you could Google. That afternoon, Margot drafted the first version of the licensing proposal, exclusive rights to TitanNet, with a clause naming me as the creator of the Brandt protocol stack. Market rate compensation plus ongoing royalties for implementation across enterprise systems. I was reviewing the draft when my phone lit up. Celeste Rowan. I stared at the name for a moment before answering. Her voice came through low, tight, too controlled. "Leora, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Has there?" I asked, already bored. "We should talk. I heard you've been in conversations. This doesn't have to get messy. This was never personal." "That line again. That's what people say when they're cornered," I said, "when they've already thrown the match and are trying to stop the fire with apologies." A pause. "Then what would it take to fix this?" I didn't respond immediately. Let the silence settle. Then calmly, "You can't fix what you never built. You treated me like a replaceable function. Now you'll have to pay for what you never valued." I hung up. No threats, no rage, just math. The next morning, Margot sent the official licensing agreement to TitanNet's legal team. Celeste didn't call again, but the CEO did. And he wasn't calling to negotiate. He was calling because the board wanted to know how $450 million worth of infrastructure had walked out the door and into someone else's name. The press release dropped on a Thursday morning. TitanNet Solutions secures exclusive rights to Brandt Protocol Stack for $45 million. It ran in TechCrunch, Forbes, and 3 different VC newsletters before noon. My name was there in bold first paragraph. No footnote. Developed by Leora Brandt, former senior systems architect at Axion Data Corp. By end of day, my inbox had more messages than it had in the past 2 months combined. Some were congratulations. A few were apologies disguised as questions. Several were cold inquiries from companies who suddenly remembered I existed. But the one that mattered most came from Axion's legal team. They had 30 days to either negotiate a license for the core technologies they were actively using or prepare for a full-blown infringement lawsuit. Margot made sure the language in our notice left no room for interpretation. They didn't respond directly. But I heard the tremor from inside colleagues reaching out leaks on message boards. The board was in panic. The acquisition was stalled. The IPO, already shaky, was now radioactive. 2 days after the announcement, Janelle called. "Leadership was impressed," she said. "Your architecture, your clarity, the fact that you documented everything." A pause. "We'd like you to come on as Chief Technology Officer." The contract came with equity assigning bonus and, most importantly, full credit for my work. My protocols would lead TitanNet's expansion into enterprise services. My name would be on the product, not buried in the back of a deck behind bullet points and buzzwords. I signed the next morning. My new office overlooked the bay. Quiet, clean sunlight warming the glass. I unpacked slowly, no rush. On my desk, I placed 2 things. The first was a framed copy of the patent certificate for the distributed authentication system. The second was a printed version of the email Celeste had sent me, the one that said, "This decision is not personal." I set it beneath the glass blotter. It was personal now, and it was profitable, and it was permanent. As I leaned back into my new chair, the CEO of Axion was stepping into a boardroom full of people who suddenly realized their entire crown jewel sat on ground they didn't own. The IPO was the first to go. Within a week of the press release, investors began pulling out. Quietly at first, then publicly, with just enough outrage to protect their reputations. Axion's valuation dipped, then dropped, then cratered. TightNet withdrew their acquisition offer the following Monday. Pending unresolved IP conflicts, they said. Everyone knew what that meant. Griffin Vaughn resigned in a late-night board meeting 3 weeks later. The press release cited personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities. Translation, they needed someone to blame, and he was the easiest to remove. Celeste held on a little longer, clawing for relevance in strategy meetings she used to lead. But without a product to pitch or a deal to close her influence, dried up. The board transitioned her out 2 months later. Her LinkedIn now lists her as an independent advisor, which in corporate speak means no one's calling. With the IPO dead and the acquisition vanished, Axion had no leverage left. They sold to a private equity firm for $93 million less than a quarter of the offer they could have had if they'd simply known what they were selling. And the platform's still alive, still running. But now they pay me $2.4 million per year in licensing fees to do so. Sometimes people ask me if it felt good watching it all unravel, but I didn't destroy Axion. I didn't leak code. I didn't torch servers or sabotage systems. I just owned what I built, and I made sure no one could take it from me again. They tried to erase the woman behind the product. I let the paperwork do the talking. Now every line of code they run echoes with my name. Every invoice reminds them who made their success possible and who they dismissed in an email on a Tuesday afternoon without even a meeting. I didn't burn the house down. I bought the land under it. And then I built something better. Epilogue. The real credit line. People talk about the money, of course. The licensing deal, the royalties, the stock options. It's the easiest part to understand, quantifiable, headline-friendly, clean. But that was never the point. The real win was walking into a conference and seeing my name on the keynote slide, not buried in the acknowledgments or tacked onto someone else's vision, mine. The Brandt protocol stack taught in graduate programs, cited in research papers, dissected in whiteboard interviews. It wasn't just a system anymore. It was a standard. VC firms started adding new clauses to their due diligence IP audits, founder credit checks, proof of authorship. Quiet ripple effects that started from one signed license and 7 federal filings. And Celeste. Her name comes up occasionally in case studies on slides labeled "How Not to Lead." I've heard professors mention her during business school lectures, a symbol of what happens when you underestimate the wrong person in the right position. She made herself memorable, just not in the way she intended. As for me, I kept building. TightNet gave me the freedom to innovate the team to execute and the credit to claim what I'd already earned. I don't sit in the back of the room anymore watching someone else present my diagrams. I walk onto the stage and speak in my own voice. There are mornings when I get to the office early before the rest of the floor wakes up. I make my coffee take in the skyline and sit for a moment with the only 2 things on my desk that never move. On the left, a framed certificate for U.S. Patent Number 10, 984-729 Distributed Authentication Protocol. On the right, the printed email that ended my time at Axion. This decision is not personal. That's what it said. So I made it $45 million worth of professional.